So what I'd like to just discuss briefly is my perception of, if you like, the open scholarship and research community from my very limited UCL perspective. I'm Vice-Provost for Research at UCL. I'm possibly part of the failure for the budgetary activities at UCL. I chair the Library Committee at UCL. I also chair the Research Infrastructure and Computing Committee, and we do have separate lines at UCL. I've also been an avid user of research data for management activities, but also as the chair of one of the HEFCE subpanels in the recent REF activity. We've been engaged with that side of things too. So it's I try to come at it from all sorts of directions. So what I'd like to briefly talk to you about today is a little bit about UCL and the background, some of the challenges that we're facing with relationships to compliance with research funders and funding agencies, our approach and our observation of why we are actually committed to open access and the benefits of open access. Talk briefly again on the now famous total cost of ownership challenge, and then discuss briefly one or two innovations that we're trying to pursue to diversify the landscape, and particularly about UCL Press, which has been relaunched within UCL recently, and then finally just end on some of the recent challenges that HEFCE have thrown in our way as well through their statements about REF 2020. So I'm very fortunate to work very closely with Paul Ellis, who's our librarian and also the CEO of UCL Press. Paul is not here, unfortunately. He's, for some reason, accepted an invitation to speak in a meeting in Milan. So I'm in Birmingham. And lovely it is too. So, UCL and open access. UCL was founded in 1826 with a commitment actually to accessibility, not to open access, but to welcome those at that time who from all sorts of unfortunate backgrounds that prevented them from going to Oxford and Cambridge. Because in 1826, obviously, you had to be a card-carrying member of the Church of England and also a man in order to get an education in England, and UCL provided opportunities for those that didn't fit under those criteria. We have been long-term advocates of the value of open access, and we are totally committed to it, but we have been going down the avenue and come across the challenges which come from the scale of the process, the complexity associated with it, the changing regulatory environment that we're working on in the UK, and also the cost. So UCL has now something like 2,600 academic staff. It has 3,000 postdocs. We've got 5,000 PhD students. So we've got 11 or so thousand researchers, and it seems on average they produce, on average, one piece of publication each year. So we publish about 11,000 items a year. Mixture between research articles, monographs, grey literature, conference proceedings. When I started, this is about 7 years ago, we had great difficulty in finding out what it was that we published as an institution. When we engaged with Scopus or with the other people, we discovered there were whole things that weren't listed under UCL. I think we had something like 1,600 possible addresses for UCL outputs. So the first task was to deal with the data amalgamators to make sure that everything was recognized as UCL. So that was the first step, and that had a transformational effect on our rankings in certain tables, the Central Science Indicators, YS, from Thomson Reuters. Used to have us at 33. When we all came together, I think we moved up to 15 in their ranking of citations. So first of all, finding everything you produce as an institution has been a challenge for us. And then obviously the other challenges with scale and complexity come with then trying to disseminate and collect that and find it in the appropriate fashion. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we've done in response to the Gold Open Access challenges put forward by research funders and by Finch. Then talk about how we think that's beneficial in some respects, but also the downside of it. For us, we have an institutional turnover now of £1 billion a year, of which 385 is spent on research spend. We are very, if you like, dependent upon ensuring that we are not penalised by our research funders. And so when RCUK and when the Wellcome Trust say that they have a mandate for publication, we have to take that very seriously, because if we don't, we could risk losing significant parts of our business from those funders. So we have committed totally to being compliant with RCUK's requirements and compliant with Wellcome and the other charities. So what we've done is to engage a very large, if you like, internal communications program to get authors actually to start engaging with open access, because as you know, authors were not uniformly enthusiastic about open access prior to these initiatives. UCL has been running an open access mandate for a number of years, but without any compliance requirements from the institution, and we probably ran at about 10% of compliance of people depositing their material in our depository. With the onset of the RCUK funding, we have not only taken money from RCUK and Wellcome, but we've also put a budget allocation from our own library sources, enhanced library resources, to cover additional gold open access costs, because we wanted to get the community who were publishing in the space that open access funding was coming from to engage. And so we felt much better to pay a few extra OA bills from those who were swept up with the enthusiasm of open access publishing than to make it a difficult landscape for them to navigate. So that means that we've spent quite a lot of money on open access. We've currently totally satisfied the RCUK mandate for the first year at 115% compliance. We are already at 93% compliance of our target for this financial year 2014-15. So what we've done is put a lot of effort into the library resources to ensure that we know what we're producing in open access. We know what's going through our books. The greatest challenge for us is actually to know what of the papers which are co-authored by UCL authors that are actually being published in collaborations with lead authors from other institutions. Because I think one of the shortcomings with the metadata that comes out of journal publications at the moment is an indication of capturing an open access journal, an open access paper, which one of my colleagues might be an author on, but actually wasn't paid for by UCL. And I think that's something which I would like to know, because I don't know how many of my colleagues are producing open access publications, but as a non-primary author. And that would be something most valuable to have. However, what we do have at UCL is we have a thing called UCL Discovery, which is the front end behind our repository. On the repository, I think there's something like 290,000 articles. I'm looking at Martin Moyles, my colleague at the front, who has a daily update, clicks through on these things. I think we have about 290,000 items on UCL Discovery, of which only 26,000 are actually available for download. The reason for that is that many of those 2,900 items are historical 1980s, 1990s items, which are metadata is there, but there's nothing behind it. But since we've really been putting the pressure on our colleagues to engage with open access, we've had significant growth in the last 18 months in the number of items which are available for download. And we are anticipating the slope of that curve to grow quite sharply going forward. The positive feature from the institution's point of view and the researcher's point of view is the accessibility of that work to the world. So this plot shows the number of downloads that we have from UCL Discovery. So although we only have 29,000 items that could be downloaded, currently our annual downloads are running at 1.5 million a year. And so the cumulative number of downloads is coming up to 6 million over the last few years. I used to give a bottle of champagne to the millionth, the 2 millionth, the 3 millionth, the 4 millionth download. I think we're going to do it for the 5 minute, but after that, my largesse is running out, as is my cellar. And so I think we'll now take it as just a trajectory of the times. But this is really graphic illustration to me of the value of having material available in your institutional repository, so that the institution and the author's work is known, and the case that YS was making. So I am an open access pragmatist. I think it's good for the researcher, I think it's good for the institution, and from my point of view, I want to see open access because it's driving up the exposure and hopefully positively the reputation of my institution. However, as we've already heard, there is a bit of the downside on the open access agenda as imposed upon us, I think, by BIS and also our relationships perhaps with some of the publishing industry, that at the moment the rate of increase of the money that we're spending out of library budgets on subscription and on Gold OA is growing at an unsustainable rate, and that was the case very clearly made by the speaker from JISC earlier today. So we can't carry on like this. I can't carry on paying Gold Open Access to all of my authors irrespective of where they want to publish or where their funding has come from. So I certainly welcome the discussions that JISC has been having in looking at ways of ameliorating the impact of APC, either through tokens or through offsets or various other things like that. And that's something which is got to sustain going forward, because I can't see RC UK continuing to top slice money out of the research budget to pay for Gold Open Access. That's going to have to slow down or stop. We can't afford, therefore, to fully fund the Gold Open Access for our institutional outputs. I would say that probably of the 11,000 items which we publish a year at UCL, probably about 6,000 of those would be RC UK sponsored activities, and probably half of those might be co-authored. So we will have to be looking at something like 3,000 or 4,000 potentially viable Gold OA items coming out of UCL, and if it's at £1,700 per item, that's quickly, top of my head, something like £7 or £8 million a year on OA payments on top of our subscription. We can't afford it. So we have to find another way of moving forward, and reducing the APC load is going to be vital. But I'm delighted that JISC is handling that so effectively, and look forward to some moderation there. However, the natural response to something is, if you can't afford to pay it, why not find another route? And there are two other routes. Obviously, there's the green route, which we can talk about, but also there's the do-it-yourself route, the DIY. And that's why we've also started looking seriously at developing or redeveloping UCL Press. UCL Press is first and foremost going to be a free service to UCL staff and students. It will be an open access model, and therefore we are taking essentially the costs of the editorial elements and so forth into the system, into the institution. But relative to the numbers which I've just said for the potential charges on Gold Open Access of £8 million a year, I can tell you we can do this a lot cheaper than that. So what we've done is started to look at this on a variety of foci for journals, for monographs, and for textbooks. We will be generating, if you like, electronic material free. We'll be developing or utilising print on demand, which obviously won't be free. Opportunities for those people who, like me, like to have something physically substantial. I'm afraid I'm not a great advocate, personal living advocate of e-data. I like the tangible physical book in my room, which I think is an interesting psychological, perhaps a generational thing. We had a project at UCL on with my colleagues in digital humanities which they called the future of reading. I also have another group who works on sustainable cities, and I got this email saying the future of reading, which I misinterpreted as being a study of the of Berkshire town. However, that's one of the challenges of reading, obviously. So we've set up, or setting up within the faculties that are interested in exploring this, editorial boards who will develop their own policies on editing and the peer review process. And we are setting up the opportunities of trying to encouraging those who don't normally get into the publication business, undergraduate students, postgraduate students, much more opportunity to publish their works in suitably peer-reviewed environment. But also, as I said, one of the things which I'm particularly concerned about is the potential of the institutional impact that will come from this. Just in briefly, because of the time, UCL Press, we're looking at the journal formats. We already do some journals, and I'll talk very briefly about those. Research monographs, we will be publishing our first monograph, I think, later in 2015. We have a series planned for those, and also we're involved with projects of producing e-textbooks. We already host some journals, which I'm sure you are avidly readers of. The one which has been the longest running is the Journal of Bentham Studies. Of course, UCL has not only Jeremy Bentham's body, physical body, or at least his skeleton, but also we have the body of his work as well, which has not been widely studied as those who are great advocates for him feel. So we have the Journal of Bentham Studies, which is there. We have 3 others, but we have half a dozen or so more journals which are being developed at the moment. The open monograph, we've already heard of the challenges and the opportunities of the monographic work. We did an internal survey amongst our staff about monographic willingness to publish on an open access UCL Press. One of the interesting things was it was the established researchers who were really enthusiastic about that. The more junior researchers, I think, have to be understandably a little bit more concerned about where they publish. Although I hope they will recognise that UCL Press will have a cachet comparable to other world-leading presses in the near future, particularly helped by the fact that their senior colleagues are more than willing to publish in UCL Press. So I think our first monograph publishing next year is going to be authored by Lisa Jardine, and we have similarly stellar authors lined up for subsequent publications. We're also, through Paul Ellis and the colleagues in the library, involved with collaborative activities within the League of European Research Universities and other partners such as Amsterdam, Zurich and so forth in developing a European-wide universities network of e-monographic publishing, which again, the idea is that the universities add their, if you like, editorial skills to ensure the quality of the outcomes. The e-textbook area is obviously something which is outside some of the discussions that we've had today, but I think one which, again, is being pressing upon us as we have more and more students demanding more and more access to resources. Having physical resources in libraries are becoming more challenging. So having e-textbooks are going to be very important, but having open access free e-textbooks will be very exciting. We have a JISC project where we are actually developing two open access textbooks at the moment. And I think that will be something which we'll look forward to doing much more of. So we're not there yet. UCL Press isn't going to be the answer to all of the problems, not for a year or two. We still are running into this cash flow challenge, which I trust the JISC colleagues will help us resolve. Otherwise, UK's university budgets and library budgets are going to be seriously compromised. Just to put that in context, last year we spent 2.1 million additional funds on open access in addition to the RC UK and the charitable money that we got. And as I said, if we were to carry that on, that number would grow to 8 million, and we can't afford to do that. And then we've got finally this complexity now that HEFCE is introduced. I welcome HEFCE's requirements for mandating majority of material to be open access before 2000, after 2016 for REF 2020. Their current requirement for that to be on within 3 months of acceptance means that it's taking the library and the institution out of the monitoring loop. And I think that's going to be a disaster, because we've shown with how we can respond to RCUK that if we are responsible, we the library, we the central administrative facilities, we can ensure we follow up police and ensure that we get compliance with the mandate. If it's just based on some correspondence between the publisher and the author and 3 months window, I won't even know what papers are failing to be submitted to open access and what the failure is for compliance. So it may be, and I've discussed this with Stephen Hill, I don't know if he's here or other colleagues from HEFCE, they understand the nuance between the relationship between the author and the institution. But not all of my colleagues are really sort of clued up as to the significance or otherwise of some of their actions on responding to mandates or otherwise. And it, I think, is to be welcomed that HEFCE wants open access. If they just made it relative to publication, I know there's this discussion that authors are closest to involved with the publication at acceptance, but I'll tell you that only 10% of them ever performed a deposit before, and that might grow to 15 or 20% if they think they're mandated. It will not be 100%, and that'll be damaging to my institution, and it'll fail HEFCE's objectives. So in conclusion, I think open access is good for research, it's good for researchers, and it's good for higher education. I think compliance is challenging, but it works if it can be managed by the institution. If it's left in the hands of the author, I'm less convinced. I think the APC gold models are unsustainable, but they may be under change. And I think higher education institutions have got a chance to regain their role as promulgators of information and content. OUP obviously started that 600 years ago. They may now be locked into an old-fashioned model, perhaps, but I think other universities need to do their role in the role of content supplying, and now is time for change. Thank you very much.